Welcome to Mom Enough Live. I'm Erin Erickson here with my mom, Marty, and we are so excited for our conversation today with Sarah Reichstadt of Kinderberry Hill Child Development Centers. We're going to be talking about science, technology, engineering, and math, which are essential learning areas even in early childhood. And STEM develops a child's inquiry, exploration, natural curiosity, and these skills will foster lifelong learning. And in today's fast-paced technological world, it's essential that our children learn these skills early on. So today we're going to be talking about the many ways families can enhance STEM learning at home. Our guest today, Sarah Reichstadt, has been a part of Kinderberry Hill for over 20 years, and she has spent the first half of her career in the classroom, so she has so much knowledge about hands-on teaching kids, learning, and all of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And then she has also been in management roles, and she's been the education coordinator for Kinderberry Hill now for nearly a decade. So she has tons and tons of experience in early childhood, and we're so grateful to have her here today to share her expertise on this topic. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Erin. It's good to see you guys again.
It's great to see you too.
It is. I echo that, and just so happy to have you with us, Sarah. You always do such a good job of really making these concepts real for parents and giving people very concrete things they can do today. So I just love that, and I know our listeners and viewers do as well. So let's start off with a real basic question. What is STEM? Erin has talked about it a little bit in her introduction, but what is it and why is it so important in early childhood? I think a lot of people think about it as something that becomes important when kids are in 5th grade or in high school even, but it's really important in the early years. Why is that?
First of all, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And when we think about children, we don't usually think of those academics. And when we think about those, we think of them kind of as challenging academic skills, right? When we think about physics and calculus, those are classes that we're going to have to really buckle down and pay attention for. And so when we're talking about it and early childhood, this is the time when children's brains are wiring the fastest they're ever going to wire. They also are, at this age, children are figuring out more about themselves. They're learning what they're good at, what they like to do, what's fun for them. So why not introduce these skills to them, lay the foundation when their brain is so efficient and they are figuring out who they are, so that when they are meeting these challenging academics later, they look at them with maybe a challenge or excitement, or maybe they will look at them in a joyful manner because they've had this experience with them that was fulfilling when they were younger and forming their image of themselves. Also, the STEM piece, the reason it's so important to start young is, like Erin talked about earlier, our current and future workforce is going to need those skills. Everything's changing so fast right now. My phone updates and I'm kind of lost for a day there. And that's not going to change. So these skills are really important.
Well, I so appreciate that. And I think we can all think back to different classes we had growing up. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, math or oh, this. And it is so important to have these positive experiences early on so that children can also kind of connect with their competence in these areas and feel that sense of confidence as the learning gets more and more challenging. Because I have a high schooler and 2 in college, and the kinds of learning they're doing is so advanced. And so I can really see where this becomes essential for forming those early neural pathways to support that learning lifelong. So I'm curious for families, a lot of us are probably wondering, like, how do we help our kids with the STEM learning in everyday activities or routines? Are there things that families can do to add more STEM learning in their daily lives?
Yeah, we're all so busy all the time, just trying to look at our daily routine and what little boosts can we give. Maybe we're thinking about mealtime. Why not invite the children to cook with us? There's measuring that happens. There's chemical reactions that are happening when we cook, and lots of things that we can tie into these STEM concepts. The difference between a tablespoon or a teaspoon of salt makes a big difference in your enjoyment of dinner. So just thinking about those simple things, pouring activities, putting some measuring cups in the bathtub is a great way to think about adding a little extra STEM. Or so many busy families, we're in the car all the time. We're in the car driving somebody to soccer or somebody, here and there. And a lot of times our little ones are just kind of along for the ride. But we can do something as simple as look at all the houses. They all have pointy roofs. Why are the roofs pointed, do you think? Or there's railings on all of these decks. Why did somebody engineer that, do you suppose, on those high decks? Just little things like that to kind of engage conversation and that critical thinking that comes into play with STEM.
Those are great suggestions. And, when you mentioned being in the car, I think that car time is so rich for parents and children. And a lot of times, the kids might be bickering in the back seat or something, and we're racing to be on time for that soccer game or whatever it is for little kids. And I remember when Erin and her brother Ryan were little kids, and one of the games I did in the car with them, which they just loved, and I think I just kind of made it up on the spot one time, when they were probably squabbling in the back seat.
Yeah.
And it was never Erin's fault, of course,
Of course not.
Yeah, I hope Ryan's not listening. But anyway, but I would do solve for X and introducing algebra to the kids. And I did that when they were little, 3-4 years old, when they were first starting to learn basic addition. And but I would frame it as an algebraic equation, a real simple one, 2 + 3 = X.
Yes.
What is X? And then you work up 2 + 3 - 1 is X. And they would just get into that and really be quick with the answers. It was so fun to see, how that played out just during those car rides. I don't know if Erin even remembers it, but she was really good in math as she got older. I'll take a little bit of credit. How about that, Erin?
Yeah, I did love math. I really loved math. And I think that those early, even those early exercises. And I mean, I think you can do it with toys too. Like,
sure,
you have 3 toys and you have 2 friends. So how many toys is each person going to have, and they don't even really realize like, oh, that's a math problem, but it is,
Right. Right.
So
and then
it's a great way.
Kind of cuts through that idea, and I think a lot of girls historically have had this idea that they're not good at math before they even really know what it is. So doing it without even naming it, and then later naming it and say, "Whoa, you are good at math." I remember when you used to do this in the car or with the toys on the floor. Well, let me get to another question for you, Sarah. What materials do you recommend families have on hand to boost STEM exploration and play? And I love that you use those words, exploration and play, with regard to STEM, because that's really important.
My favorite toy of all time is just a block. I love blocks, wooden blocks, Legos, Magnetiles. It doesn't matter. Any block is excellent for STEM. But we don't have to go buy a set of blocks. There are simple things to build with. That you can just find around the house. If it's a paper towel roll, Solo cups are so fun for kids to stack and then plow into. And then thinking about, as parents, can we offer them tape, rubber bands, even paper clips to see if their engineering goes a little bit higher? We can challenge them just a little bit more with those things. Magnifying glasses, binoculars, always good to have on hand. Keep them in the car, the binoculars in the car, those are helpful. And then I would say another great thing that families could think about, if you have those, maybe it's an old clock or a calculator that doesn't work, is there something that they can pry apart, look into, kind of like a little tinker station for them to look in there and find, the circuits or the wires or the gears. And then they can take those apart and engineer their own invention if they would like to, just those little things, easy to do around the house and really boost that STEM learning for children and the play.
Yeah, those are such great suggestions, and I could really see how that plays out going forward because we did a lot of that with my children when they were young, and my youngest son is now very quick to like take apart old electronics. Obviously, he has a good understanding of which parts maintain a charge, and he's careful about it. But it's really that early years and kind of the natural progression of kind of playing with things and taking things apart has gotten him to the point where he's building really incredible and interesting things from a science and engineering standpoint. And he was very fortunate too that to have an amazing next door neighbor and who was really involved in kind of creating space for him to develop things. He's a woodworker and he used to be in clock club when he was growing up. So he actually bought this very old clock mechanism and he and my son reworked it and they built a new like frame for it. And so this was several years ago, but this process of kind of working with another mentor has been really an important part of that for him. And sometimes I think it can be really helpful to engage other community members or friends to support our kids in this. So if you have like a family friend who's really good with computers, or you have a family friend like we do who's a woodworker or who does some other kind of craft or thing that they could use with your kids, it's a great way to kind of expose your kids to other things. And I really credit a lot of that connection with our neighbor for my son's interest in engineering. So I think there's so many cool ways that you can kind of spark these early interests for our children and watch that bloom as they get older.
Yes.
And see where that takes them.
I love that.
So I'm thinking about the really young children and wondering, like, are there things we can do in the youngest ages to help foster this love of STEM and to support their brain development around these important types of learning?
Right. When we think of babies, we don't always think about math. But the language we use can, even if we're intentional about some of the language, we can start laying that foundation. Let's say the baby's in the high chair and I'm going to give some banana. All I have to say is, would you like more? More? Would you like some? Holding out 2 pieces of the banana, a little piece, and then a big chunk, letting them compare and pick which one they would like. All of these little things are just tiny pieces of STEM that we can kind of throw in versus me just being busy and, drop a piece of banana on the tray. little language things we can use. Also, when we think about the little ones, just taking them outside, the wind, the leaves, the birds, all of that, just drawing attention to that little piece, putting babies on grass. I feel like we don't do that very much, but just letting them grab a handful of grass and explore a little bit. Opening a window when it's raining, finding a sunny spot on the floor and looking at shadows and watching, how the light changes when you turn your hand over. All of those are easy, quick little things that we can do for the little ones to boost a little STEM play.
I'm so glad, Sarah, that you mentioned getting outdoors. And I know that you and your colleagues at Kinderberry Hill have really taken nature into your education of young children. And of course, that's been a cause of mine for many years. And working with Rich Lube, the author of Last Child in the Woods, who really kind of broke open this issue in so many ways. And just kind of getting parents and educators on board to bring nature into children's lives, both for learning and also for their social and emotional development, because it's such a stress reducer for kids and adults. But I just remember things that had to do with nature and getting kids to be really astute observers. And for example, example, taking photographs using your phone or, a little disposable camera, even if anybody still does those things, but to be able to print things out and then see how the trees that you see out your window change over the seasons. And how does the moon change? How does the sun change at different times of day, different times of the year? There are just so many little things you can do building on kids' natural observation. And I remember in particular Erin's daughter when she was about 11 months old, and she was an early walker, but she was just tiny for her age. And she would push her stroller holding on to the basket beneath it when she didn't want to be in the stroller. She wanted to push it, and then she just see stuff at ground level, at her eye level, that she would put into that basket, and we would go out and walk for hours, and then we'd take it all home and throw a blanket down on the grass and kind of sort and organize these things. But I just remember her sense of awe in those real basic things. And I think we adults sometimes lose that sense of awe and don't stop. We don't have enough time to stop and really join with our kids in that. And what a beautiful moment for parents and children or teacher and a child to connect around that.
Yeah, well, you both mentioned something that really struck a chord with me, which is just like Sarah, when you were talking about not just putting the food on the tray and Mom, this walk, I do think we get so caught up in all the things we think we need to do, and that we're less present and mindful in the moment with our children. And I think that mindful presence as parents is really essential to making every moment a learning moment. Now, obviously, we don't have to be perfect. It's not about perfection. Perfection is the enemy of good enough. And, the goal is not that we're always going to be on 100%. But I do think that we would all be served to put away our own technology to really take these moments to foster the learning. And it's really so simple. I think that's what I'm so struck with here, is that these are really simple things, but the power of these simple things is immense, and the learning opportunities are there for our use if we take a moment just to pause and think about that. So I really appreciate that you both brought that up in your own ways.
Well, and following our child's lead or a child's lead, not feeling like we have to direct it, because that's kind of overwhelming to already busy parents who are stressed out so much of the time. And so, letting your child take the lead and then elaborating on their curiosity. I have another question for you, Sarah. What are some fun STEM activities or places to go with your child to be able to integrate these kinds of activities into their life and yours?
Some kind of fun things to do. Maybe as a family, we're thinking, there's the obvious ones like the Science Museum or the Works Museum or the zoo that has, I think, farm babies right now. So many neat places to explore just in our own cities. But if we don't have to do those big events either, there's a lot of little things that we can just do as a family. Go outside and look at the clouds. Are they fluffy? Are they, looking like pulled apart cotton balls? What kind of clouds are those? Just something as simple as that. Noticing the birds. There's so many beautiful parks and trails in Minnesota. And I think a lot of times adults think of those trails as exercise. That's where I'm going to jog. That's where I'm going to go bike. But children would love to wander for a long time out on those trails and notice what's going on. And then probably one of my favorite things, it's actually an early coding game to do with children, is like maybe take a rock, take a leaf, and the rock make me dance. So the rock means I have to spin around, and the leaf means I have to clap, and maybe the stick means I kick, and let them gather stuff and then make me do things. And that was a fun game. Yes, that was a fun game.
I love that.
It might be spin, 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 spin. But those have been fun games to do with children too, that are really STEM based.
That is so cool because I mean, that's symbolic language, you know, using leaves and sticks as a symbolism, because that's, like you said, that's really what coding is.
Yeah.
And so what a creative thing to do, and to kind of teach kids like, oh, we can make a relationship between these things,
Mhm.
and you know, ask them like, what do you want this stick to mean, and engage them in that thinking. Well, I just love all of these suggestions you've shared with us today. And we're just so grateful for our partnership with Kinderberry Hill Child Development Centers, and for the amazing information you share with us, and also especially how practical you make it. It's just so real and accessible. And I
Thank
think
you.
that's so important, because there is this, I think, drive of like, oh, flashcards and baby Einstein and all these kinds of things that are actually just not really evidence based. And so I think that it's so important that parents have this understanding of really evidence based approaches are often so simple, because they are just geared towards your child's stage of development. And these are just such fantastic tips. So Sarah Reichstad, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for joining us.
Thank
We
you.
so appreciate it. Yeah. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We're so grateful for your time. And please post your questions or comments. And we hope you'll tune in again next time. I'm Erin here with my mom, Marty, and we are Mom and Up. Have a wonderful day.